What are your kids learning in school? Probably not that much if you're an American. Ah! Let's take a look, people.
What's happening in our schools?
Oh my God.
Colleges have become leftist indoctrination centers.
All right.
It's not a new problem. It's been going on for decades. First behind the scenes and now out front.
I love this new McCarthyism, by the way. Exact same arguments that were around 60, 70 years ago. Communists have infiltrated. Nazi theory as well. You know, Jewish Bolsheviks have infiltrated academia. Yep. We're going to get a whole lot of postmodern neo-Marxist bullshit in this one. Why do all conservative women look the same? They hollow something out inside of you to make you one of them, and it just all pans out the same.
That's how radical change happens.
Ooh.
It creeps up on us. And when we finally figure out what's going on, it's too late. What's been happening on college campuses?
It really is extraordinary how fear-based the primitive conservative mind is. There have been plenty of studies showing that conservatives, just on average, are intellectually inferior in basically every imaginable way, but the strongest difference really is the fear response. Conservatives are incredibly fearful all the time. They're terrified.
Is now happening in elementary schools and high schools.
Oh, shit.
I know. I'm a mom of 2 school-aged kids.
Nobody cares.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Wait, that's your wait, that's your credential? You're a mom? That's what we've got? All right, well.
More parents are seeing it too. Thanks to the lockdowns and Zoom, we're getting a window into our children's classes.
Ooh.
It's not a pretty picture.
Oh, let's Google her? Sure, okay. The Fab Mom. Motivating Parenting Lifestyle Mom Blog by Bounce Through the Fail. It really does just look like a wine mom blog. So, yeah. Hold on. What's this woman's name? Jill Simonian. Is that it? Is that what we're doing right now? Yeah, it looks like Jill Simonian. Do we have a Wikipedia article? Oh, look, that's nice. Her Twitter account actually fronts the PragerU thing. Look at that. Mom on a mission with PragerU. 10K followers, not a huge figure. Not large enough for a Wikipedia article, probably. What do we got on the YouTube? No visible subs and tiny numbers of views. Okay, so this person really is not a huge media figure.
Kids, really young kids, are being taught stuff so radical, so devoid of what real education is, it should alarm us all.
Left logic. Shouting racial slurs at a black couple in Denny's equals racist. Yes, this is what they're teaching your kids in school.
Here are a few examples. Recently, Chicago Public Schools adopted an American history curriculum based on the 1619 Project published and promoted by the New York Times. The 1619 Project asserts that America's founding was not marked by the Declaration of Independence in 1776, but the arrival of the first African slaves in Jamestown in 1619.
This is a very defensible premise, by the way. I mean, for the lives of the average person who lived in the American colonies, the Declaration of Independence really didn't change much for them. But the fundamental material relations that would come to define America, those were, at least for the first 200 years, pretty explicitly based around slavery. I think this is a very defensible thesis. Of course, anytime you're making a statement as vague as when a founding is marked, it's always going to be a matter of opinion to some extent. It really just comes down to how effectively you can defend the premises that you're laying forward.
Historians from across the political spectrum have denounced this as a giant lie.
It's absolutely not true. It's received some modest historical criticism for some of its premises, but no, on the whole, it's been taken very seriously and received with open arms. If it wasn't, conservatives wouldn't be so pissed scared about it. On the other hand, the 1776 Commission and their America First education, or Patriot education, or whatever it was Trump tried to get done, that was universally decried by historians. I mean, across the board. If I remember correctly, historians are actually the most Democrat-aligned academic field. I think I remember the ratio being 53 Democrat voters to every one Republican voter in the history field. I mean, an overwhelming slant there. And the reason for that, frankly, is because if you understand history, it's really hard to be a conservative. Really, really hard.
The New York Times has walked back many of the project's original claims. Still,
That's also not true. It's an ongoing project, hence it's called Project, and it is revised itself because it's been the subject of years of academic development. But the idea that the way that they're phrasing this makes it sound like they got caught in lies and they were like shit, and like quickly like backspacing it. They literally showed them like deleting it. Like, no, that's not what took place.
Malicious slander of America is now being taught in schools as truth.
Slander is a legal term. If you thought that it was slander, then you could mount some kind of, well, you can't really accuse a person of being slanderous against the country of America, but no, this is not slander by any means.
And what is that truth? That America is, was, and always has been a fundamentally racist country, and that white Americans today bear responsibility for all current and historic racism.
This latter point is being simplified a little bit here. The latter point here isn't that white people today are responsible for all racism ever. The argument being levied here is that white people in America continue to ignore and benefit from the historical and contemporary existence of racism. That's true. But the 1619 Project is fundamentally systemic in its nature, and it doesn't really take time to levy blame on individual citizens. It's really more about our collective understanding of America and what we can do to address problems that still exist in it.
This bleeds perfectly into another educational debacle: diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I noticed, by the way, that she hasn't actually explained anything about the curriculum being taught to students. She said, well, kids in Chicago have been looking at a thing from the 1819 Project, or 1619 Project, and now she's just ranting off about the 1619 Project. Which, by the way, we've already gotten like 20 PragerU videos on. I mean, come on.
Now, this might sound innocent, but don't be fooled. It's a dangerous euphemism for something called critical race theory.
Damn. Would you say that being pro-equality is the same as being anti-white? Is that the argument you're making here? Anti-racism means you're anti-white? Is that the argument you're making? That's gotta be the argument.
Critical race theory says that racism is woven into the very fabric of American society.
True.
What does this look like in a school setting? Middle and high school students in Wellesley, Massachusetts, are being taught to be on the lookout for unconscious racial bias in their classmates.
Okay.
We need your help, an email to students reads. Your school leaders will be working with you this year on how to be proactive about preventing bias incidents and how to report them should they occur.
Oh my God. Hey, kids. You know, if you see any racism, maybe don't. You know, hey, you see, you're walking down the hall with Sally, you got your books, you see a racism, stop it! What? They make this sound so scary, and it's so innocuous. I mean, Christ. The funny thing is what they're trying to, they're making the argument right now that this is some kind of dystopian surveillance state. They literally had like the eye above, when what she's advocating for is literally McCarthyism. She opened this video with saying, the nefarious grasp of the leftist is lurking at every corner. You need to be vigilant at all times, shining your light on society to look for. Like, she's the one actually making the dystopic argument for a paranoid surveillance state where we're constantly on the lookout for a bad think or wrong think or whatever. But then she sees these school teachers being like, "Hey, don't look at you see racism and say, how about no?" And she loses her shit.
This warped vision of America doesn't stop at race.
I notice how she hasn't argued against the premise, by the way.
In Colorado, first graders are being taught that just because someone looks like a boy doesn't mean they are.
True!
Only they can know who they truly are.
Based.
Gender is something they choose for themselves,
True.
based on how masculine or feminine they feel.
Well, no, not how masculine and feminine they feel, whether or not they feel like a boy or a girl. You can feel like a masculine girl or a feminine boy. Yeah, this is good. Not only does it better conform to our scientific understanding of how this works, but additionally, this significantly decreases the likelihood of dysphoria and suicidality later in people who turn out to be trans. You know, conservatives boohoo crybaby themselves into a fit every day. Oh, we just don't want people to be trans because they all kill themselves. But then anytime somebody comes along and offers a solution to the suicidality problem, and this would fix it quite a bit, by the way, they're like, no, you can't do that. That's gender ideology.
Or maybe they're not fully a boy or a girl, but something in between.
Based.
Whatever that may be. To repeat, that's what children are taught in first grade.
Based.
Imagine what they're taught in second or third grade. And
the funny thing is, by the way, is that she's framing this like this is dystopian, but think about stuff that's been historically taught to kids as young as like first grade before we got like better about these issues. Yeah, Sally, you're a girl. So when you grow up, you'll be having like kids, you know? When you grow older, you'll be having kids and you'll be taking care of them. And Johnny, your job will be to provide for the family. And then there's all that weird like compulsory heterosexuality thing. Have you guys ever seen like a parent like talk to their like 6-year-old kid and talk about like marriage and girlfriends and boyfriends and stuff like that? That shit's super weird. Oh, you went over to the playground? Did you get any girlfriends over there? Like, that shit's really, really weird to me. And it primes people's expectations for what their lives are going to be like. Girls are taught from a super young age, or at least they used to be taught from a super young age, less so now, but still in many places, that they have a role. Their role is essentially as a baby incubator. That's their job. And they're supposed to be nice and docile and agreeable when men talk to them. And men are taught basically that they can do whatever they want as long as they provide for their family, you know? And then later on you have the whole don't cry kind of thing and yeah, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, early on though, that boys will be boys attitude gives them a lot of leeway to fuck people up in the playground if they want to.
of course, the world faces imminent disaster from global warming.
Yes.
The American Federation of Teachers has fully endorsed the most radical aspects of the Green New Deal,
Good.
which is already featured in California school curriculums.
Good.
In some,
And that, like, how lost do you have to be to see this and like worry?
many of our schools are teaching children that our past is terrible and that they have no future.
Wait, hold on. Okay, first of all, our past is objectively terrible. Second of all, the only reason they're not going to have a future is if people like you have your way. You can't have it both sides. You can't say, hey, don't do anything about climate change, and then scold educators for teaching children that the future is going to be kind of fucked because of people like you. You don't get to play both sides of that. I'm sorry. You can be part of the problem or part of the solution, but you can't be part of the problem and then blame people for acknowledging there's a problem because of you.
That if they are white, they are racist whether they know it or not.
No. This argument, this Robin DiAngelo tier bullshit, is sometimes thrown out in like cringy performative corporate wokeness seminars. This is not being taught to children, okay? Now, there are school children who are being taught that many people carry implicit bias and that there are many white people who still struggle with these issues, but it's not as simple as if you're white, you're racist. Personally, I think one of the ways you can improve on this is by de-essentializing the term implicit bias and acknowledge the truth, which is that black and brown people also carry implicit bias against black and brown people. They often skip over that, and that's one of the big issues, I think, with the education. But if you investigate these issues for even a tiny bit of time, you realize that there's, and I'll be honest here, there is no reason to say white people are the ones who carry implicit bias. Everybody does. If you're going to levy criticisms, do it at institutions, not at races. Now, I think for the most part, education is fine about that. But you get a couple of Robin DiAngelo Coca-Cola seminars and every conservative's running up. You know what? Who am I kidding? Even if Robin DiAngelo didn't exist, they would still say this. They've been saying this for decades. What am I, why am I even going down this road? It doesn't matter what we do or what people say. Conservatives have been bitching that everyone's teaching that all white people are racist for literally hundreds of years. These crybabies, they did this during the slave days. You want to go look up some history texts. This is real. During the slave days, people got indignant when abolitionists would accuse them of being white supremacists. Slave owners would get indignant about that. They would get mad about that. That's a real thing, by the way. And one of the criticisms that were oft levied at abolitionists back during those days were that they were unfair and uncharitable to the white race who had, in their kindness, bestowed sponsorship and charity upon the black race. The real thing. I'm almost quoting that, by the way. I'd have to dig around a little bit to find the text, but that's a real Bosch example. I just gave you an example. What, do you want me to go digging through historical texts? What do you want? Go find Ask History or something.
If they're black, they're victims, whether they experience it or not.
That's just not taught. This idea, like that black kids are growing up and the teacher is like, you Jamal, you're a victim. It's not fucking happening, okay? Now, they could say that black people experience systemic discrimination, and that would be true. They're the victims of that systemic discrimination, but the victimhood carries a lot of emotional weight that generally doesn't get caught about in education, you know? It's not usually used there.
That they should constantly question their sexual identity.
Sure, go for it.
With all this being drummed into their heads, no wonder today's kids have more psychological problems than any previous generation.
You would have to work very hard. By the way, I love this. There is absolutely no evidence to indicate that the increasing rate of autism, ADHD, and depression diagnosis in America has anything to do with any of these. You know how I know that? Because the people who suffer the most youthful depression are white suburban kids who are much more likely to be conservative, okay? The people least likely to internalize these narratives are the people most likely to suffer psychiatric issues. Whereas psychiatric issues are proportionally less frequent in people of color, people who live in urban environments, etc., etc. So no, this is a dead on arrival talking point. It's also a complete appeal to intuition right here. Oh, kids are being taught to doubt their gender. No wonder so many of them are depressed. What does that mean? What's the association here?
Maybe you think I'm cherry-picking examples to exaggerate my point.
You haven't even given examples. You're just saying all of this is happening.
Or maybe you're one of the lucky ones who sends your kids to a school that has yet to be infected by this radical agenda. Maybe. But if I were you, I wouldn't take it on faith. Find out for yourself. When I did, I was shocked to learn that all of this is happening in my school district right now. So find out what's being taught in your kid's school. Take a good hard look at curricula. Ask administrators if they endorse the 1619 project. Are they pushing
Oh God. Can you imagine after this video came out how many school administrators got worried phone calls from fucking bitchy Karens squawking at them about whether or not they support an agenda of diversity? I mean, look at this.
a diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda?
Look at that. Literally. Are you pushing a diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda? This is basically anti-racism equals anti-white. That's exactly what's happening right here.
If so, demand to see what materials the school is using. At a minimum, get to know your kids' teachers and principals. Join the PTA, attend local school board meetings.
Fuck! Why aren't lefties good like this? Dude, it's so frustrating. I know that lefties are generally a lot younger than conservatives, but like, fuck, dude. Why don't we do this shit? If lefties, if old enough to participate in these processes, jumped up. But Vosh, you're a leftist? I don't have kids. But if you have kids, yeah, you should be aggressively involved. in these PTA meetings, school board meetings, and talking to your administrators, your teachers. You can do a lot of work. But fucking boomers.
Look for allies among reasonable, like-minded parents. You don't have to agree with each other on everything. You just have to agree that the brainwashing of our children stops here. Stops now. Americans know what our children should be learning. That they must take responsibility for their conduct. That race is the least...
Wait, what? Implying that schools are teaching people to not take responsibility for their conduct? What?
Important aspect of another person.
I hate it when conservatives pull this. No conservative believes this. The Nazi that we just argued with, who was like, yeah, dude, I'm like a race-neutral Nazi, and then he started screaming racial slurs, that's the ballpark with every single one of these people. The woman who's talking this, PragerU, like the people who work there, Dennis Prager, all these people, in their hearts, they know they're racist. They promote an aggressively racist agenda. This language is indistinguishable. It's basically just a PR gussied up version of anti-racism equals anti-white. It's really no different from the kind of language that you would see at a Klan rally, except it's been sanitized a little bit for public consumption. And then they have the audacity to throw out the, well, they should care less about racists like we do. People have been pulling that shit for a century. Back when black people were literal second-class citizens, white Americans were still impugning them for focusing too much on race. That was a real thing that happened. There are lawmakers. You can go look at the speeches that they gave in their state senates and in the halls of Congress. You can look at the stuff they said. They would oscillate, vibrate between two incompatible positions, one of which was that black people were too focused on race, that civil rights protesters were too focused on race, and that the other one was blacks and whites are naturally different, and they should keep to their own. They would just frequently and frantically jump between these two positions, even though they're completely incompatible, maintain racial apartheid, and then impugn people looking to change it by saying they care too much about race. The same talking points since the beginning. Things don't change. And the anti-feminist talking points of today are pretty much identical to the ones from 100 years ago, too.
That hard work and rational thought are things we all value.
Who's questioning that? Do modern schools not promote hard work and rational thought? I mean, it's an American school system, so maybe they don't, but they're trying.
That there is nothing wrong with the bodies they were born into.
Do you think that's what the school teachers are teaching these kids? That there's something wrong with their bodies? Again, they're so good at propaganda. They're so fucking good at manipulating the discourse here. What these kids are being taught is, hey, gender's a social construct, and, you know, gender comes down to your identification. And the way that's being framed is school teachers are going up to first graders and telling them that their bodies are wrong and they should change them, which is not happening anywhere, not even slightly.
And that America was founded not to promote racism, but to guarantee sacred liberties and opportunities to its citizens.
To its citizens. So what about those people who they denied citizenship to? You know, look, we're not racist, okay? We treat all of our citizens equally. Now, of course, we don't let black people be citizens, you know, obviously, but hey, we treat our citizens equally.
And it wouldn't hurt if they learned reading and writing and math, too. I'm Jill Simonian, founder of thefabmom.com for Prager University.
Nice. Kind of spooky with it being like 99% faded out there.